I am the alternative Anthony Green, and you are watching and or listening to the No Budget podcast on Wrestle World 84.
Big guy in the Canadian territories for Stu Hart and guys like that back in the late 70s, early 80s. Basically, he came over to the WWF. He was the top job guy, like the top underneath guy for the WWF for a long time in the 80s. He happened to be there walking, the opposite way that I was. And we started talking. I was like, hey, you're Mike Sharp. And blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, I'm at his school, which was like right around the corner, taking bumps and getting my ass kicked for months and months and months and months.
What year was that?
1997.
And so when did you get to go to your first live show?
I actually talked about this today. It's funny. I was actually on a date today, which is wild because I'm recently getting divorced. But I was on a date today, and I was talking about my first show. So my first show, back then, it's still the same now. Even if you're training, you always bring your bag, your gimmick bag, your gear bag to a show. It doesn't matter, if you've got 2 weeks of training, but whatever. You always bring your gear bag. So I brought my gear bag to the show down in South Jersey near Atlantic City. I was, again, a kid. And back then, the whole funny story about it is, back then it's so much different now, again, even on the indie shows where your music, obviously everything's digital now, your music is kind of pre-programmed to go up at the right time, blah, 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 blah. Back then, you had to bring a CD with you and carry it in your gear bag. And on the CD, you had to have track 4, Vince Ceres, whatever, and they would have to, the DJ would have to switch out CDs for the entrance music. But nonetheless, I had been at the show and I was helping set up the ring, and the promoter at the time, this guy Tommy Rumsby, was a World Wrestling Coalition or something down in South Jersey. He came to me. He's like, "Hey man, we're short a guy. Do you want to wrestle?" And I wasn't ready yet. I was like, maybe had happy. I guess I'm ready. It's everyone's different, obviously, when it comes to when they're ready. I was about 6 months in, and I got in. They put me under hood. They put me under mask, because they were like, "Hey kid, you're basically just going to get squashed. Don't let them see your face. We're going to put you under hood." And it was me and this guy Chris against this. And I'm trying to remember the guy's name. He was like this Bruiser Blackwell, like old AWA Bruiser Blackwell knockoff. Guy was like 600 pounds, couldn't move for shit, and was gasping for air within 5 minutes. So the unfortunate problem with that was we were just supposed to get squashed, and we threw like some double drop kicks at him, all this bullshit, and he came at us and he double lined us. He double clotheslined us. And the bastard was so blown up that instead of hitting me in the chest, where you're supposed to hit somebody with a line 90% of the time, hit somebody with a line, he hit me upside my jaw and dislocated my jaw my first match. And thank God I was under a fucking hood. So, excuse my cursing. Under a hood. That nobody could see my face because I was basically crying under the hood.
So I know one of the bigger companies you work for is GTS Wrestling, right?
I don't know if it's bigger, but I've done dark matches with the WWF back in the day. I've done. I actually just got reached out to not that long ago by AEW which I'm not gonna. I can't. I don't have the time for it. Weirdly, because this isn't my full-time thing. Yeah, but GTS, man, the following on GTS it's amazing. It's wild. It's wild because I've known Grim and Doo-Hop. I've known them for a long, long time. Over 20 years at this point. And they have made this small like empire out of this first toy figures and now this wrestling show that they do. It's amazing.
It was incredible to see the growth he had with this channel because I don't watch him very much, but I do like the scout talent from him, to do podcasts. Right. I've had Steve Off from Wrestling Magic on here. I've had Shamar. And every one of his guys are so grateful and so respectful towards everything. I think he just runs a really good show.
He really does. Dave is, Grim is, he knows what he's doing. It's so funny to think about, like, that. So a lot of people will shit on quote unquote backyard wrestling, quote unquote. But yeah, so many great talents have gone through there and are still there. Guys will come up and they'll kind of hone their craft there and still come back even after they've kind of gone on and done things. But man, oh man, Dave Grim has really done wonders with it. I didn't even know, honestly, what the hell Twitter was when it came down to it. I had never had a Twitter until I reached out to Grim. I was like, hey, Dave, I need to come down and work a little bit with you guys, try to keep myself going. Obviously he was like, yeah, come down. And he's like, dude, do yourself a favor and start a Twitter. Because it'll blow up. And I literally did one day. It was the day before I debuted. I started Twitter. I had like 5 followers. And then next day, here we go.
That first day you showed up, I was one of the people who followed you almost immediately. I got it for all of his talent because I like to watch them progress through, and then once they get a little bit better into it, try to reach out and go for it.
Yeah, no, it was so awesome because there's so many great guys down there, and I can't put over some of those guys enough. Again, like I've known Dave, I've known Doo-Hop I've known Dave and Doo-Hop when they basically have switched roles at this point. Dave was super skinny when I first met him, and Doo-Hop was, probably 400 pounds when I first met him. And they basically, I'm not saying that Dave is 400 pounds, but I'm saying they've kind of switched roles in that. And they've always been great. Like, I worked tag matches back in, I have videos, short clips of tag matches I worked with Grim and Doo-Hop in 1999, 1998 at shows, indie shows all over New Jersey and stuff like that. Yeah, it's wild to see the evolution of both of them.
Yeah, because he's kind of got his own major indie promotion now. That's probably one of the biggest ones on YouTube.
It's got to be. It has to be. There's no way it's not that it's not one of the
At some point, he had more subscribers than Impact Wrestling. I remember when that was there. I think they beat him.
Really?
But at some point, he did have more than Impact Wrestling, who was on national TV at that time. Right.
Well, that's the beauty. I honestly, there are times where I'm in the middle of the road. There are times when I wish that I had. So everybody tells me all the time, because of my body type and my affect when it comes to how I talk and my promos and stuff like that, where they're like, man, if you were 10 years older, if you were born back in the 60s instead of the 70s, and you could have been in the WWF in the 80s, you would have cleaned up. I've had a million guys tell me that. But at the same time, I think I'm like, gosh, I would give my left foot to be 20 years old now, like Isaac.
Oh, yeah.
Be 20 years old now and just starting out when YouTube is such a big thing that you can get over on YouTube, which is, you don't have to really you have to bust your ass, but you don't really have to drive from show to show to show to show to show to show to get yourself noticed.
You're going to bust your ass and seek the way.
Either way, obviously.
Bust your ass and doing nothing about it. Because there's a lot of people who busted their ass and got nothing out of it.
Yeah. Well, I've seen a lot of that. And, listen, I'm not exactly, top of the world, and I busted my ass for a long time back in the, early 2000s. But it's not easier now, obviously, again, because you still have to bust your ass. But there's so many more outlets to get yourself seen and get yourself.
It's a lot easier to get noticed.
Yeah, which is awesome. So again, I'm in that middle road where, like, gosh, if I had been around in the early '80s or mid '80s, I probably could have cleaned up for a while. Back then, at least in the WWF or the AWA or the NWA down in the Crockett's. Or now, I being 20 and being out on these YouTube channels like GTS and stuff like that, or NWA, was it Power Hour or whatever they call it down
Power,
there.
yeah.
Yeah. So I got a couple of buddies of mine who just literally just messaged me. A friend of mine, Wrecking Ball, he just messaged me. He's down at Power right now doing the tag gimmick. He's like, you need to come down here. You need to come down here. I'm like,
I think Red Titus just joined NWA.
And Rhett's down there. Yep, Rhett's down there. He just did his gimmick down there. Yeah, no, it's... I'm just too old for it, unfortunately, at this point.
So, I didn't know this until I was going through a Twitter called Wrestling Pride or something like that, but you are openly gay, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How has that affected your wrestling career?
Well, I actually just got named. I was just put on. I didn't even know. Literally until about half hour ago, I was put on the top 200 LGBTQ pro wrestlers, in the world. And no, it's awesome. Now it's obviously it's a lot different. So when I first started wrestling, it was much different, and I was kind of closeted. Only the dudes I traveled with knew that I was out, and so I still had to kind of toe the line. Back then, in the early 2000s, I would have to go to listen. I don't. I would have to go to gentlemen's establishments, the topless bars with everyone after the shows, especially up in Pennsylvania, up in Northeast Pennsylvania. But yeah, no, it really wasn't terrible because the people who knew, and nobody gave me any shit. It was never really a problem for me.
I don't think they were scared to say anything. You are very.
I think so. Yeah, there was a lot of folks that were gonna get their heads turned around backwards if they had said anything. And it really wasn't that big a deal. It really, it's just like, no, it didn't make a difference where I was.
Yeah. I know there's been people who have had a hard time in wrestling because they're gay. I believe Chris Canyon was one of them.
Yeah.
He had a very hard time just because he was gay.
And that's obviously on a much bigger level, obviously where he was. And he had obviously some other issues, psychologically, it wasn't just being gay. There was obviously some other issues that kind of contributed to it, apparently, from what I've heard. But yeah, no, guys were, it's so hard to go from that 80s, 90s wrestling atmosphere where the gay guy was automatically the heel because wrestling played on the homophobia that was rampant at the time. You have characters, and some of the great characters of all time, like Goldust, that was literally just built on homophobia, but it was over as hell. Don't care, and Dustin Rhodes took that to the hill. You had guys
Just admitted too.
Yeah, honestly, it's so wild how he took it and ran. One of the great heels of all time, and when he first debuted. You had guys like Adrian Adonis, basically, that were punished, who weren't even gay, like Dustin Rhodes. Adrian Adonis was punished for whatever he was punished for gaining too much weight. And wouldn't lose weight, so they made him a gay character in the early 80s. They made him adorable Adrian Adonis. He basically went from this legit badass, like, biker type guy, and they made him this gay dude with mascara and, pink tights, and that he didn't fit into very well.
Yeah.
But then there was also guys in the late 70s, early 80s, like Adrian Street and stuff like that, where they were just over the top, kind of. And people don't realize, even like the Ric Flair gimmick, even though it's kind of this, ladies' man thing, because it comes from Buddy Rogers and it comes from the Nature Boy gimmick, back in the 50s, like the Nature Boy gimmick, and who's the other guy? Not just Buddy Rogers. Gosh, he would come to the ring in the robe back in the 50s. I can't remember his friggin' name for the life of me. It's gonna kill me. But there was almost this subversive gay element to the gimmick, and it got over because they were heels, and there was kind of the Izzy isn't he type gimmick. So it's always worked, but unfortunately, most of the time, any LGBTQ representation has had to be the heel. Which is
that way with most minority groups. I mean, New Jack was one of the biggest heels in ECW for being black.
Yeah, but he is like.
He played it up a lot.
But you had guys, with the African American thing, you had guys like Junkyard Dog, who were the top baby faces of the territory. Like before Junkyard Dog came up to the WWE.
WWF. MLK kind of person when New Jack was more of a Malcolm X.
Yeah. Junkyard Dog was down in Bill Watts in Mid-South, and he was their top guy. And you had guys like Ron Simmons and stuff like who I had the pleasure to meet not that long ago. We had a good time. These guys were African American, but they were over like Rover as baby faces though. So the LGBTQ thing it's a little more nuanced. And it was a little tougher, I think.
Oh, definitely. So we touched a little bit with GTS. You have worked with SWF, right?
I do, yeah, SWF. Right now, so I try to stay as close to home as possible because I'm not a travel guy, because I have my Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, got a nice retirement package coming to me, so... otherwise, listen, I'd be down in Jacksonville right now. No shit. I will be down in Jacksonville, or I'd be down to NWA Power literally right now. But it's tough because I have this kind of 9 to 5, and I'm older. I'll be 45 in 3 weeks. I can't walk away from my 9 to 5, Monday through Friday with my retirement, and. But yeah, you have SWF, you have Pro Wrestling After Dark, you have Standalone Wrestling, you have all these different companies that luckily just kind of run around Jersey, New York, Delaware, Pennsylvania, places like that. So it's nice that I can still get out there and do these shows and not have to really travel. Like I don't have to get on a plane to go to a show.
The reason I brought up SWF is because I've heard a lot of different mixed views with Rob Fury. What is your experience with Rob Fury?
So, Rob's a great guy. Rob's a character. And he's one of those guys. So, he's one of those guys he's the same person in the ring that he is out of the ring. Like, there's no, like, turn-off switch. Most people are completely different when they're in the ring and they're out of the ring. Like myself, I'm a completely different person when I'm outside of the ring than I am in the ring. He's definitely the same person. There's been a lot of things, and I haven't known Rob that long. I've only known him for a little over a year. I had heard all the same shit that everybody heard. And a lot of people were in my ear, like when I was going to go do some stuff for Rob, they were like, "Hey, well, this guy, blah 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 blah, this guy, blah 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 blah," and I will judge people on my own.
Yeah.
I will meet them face to face. I'll make my own character assessment. And Rob has been nothing but good to me. Rob and I have had many, many, many conversations on the phone in the middle of the day, talking about booking plans for this guy, that guy, this guy. And he comes to me a bit to just kind of like chew my ear and see what I think of this or that or this or that. And he trusts me. And at this point, I trust him. As far as what he might have done in the past or might not have done in the past, I don't know. I wasn't around for that. So I take him at face value now and where he is now, and he's a good guy.
I've heard people talk about Balls Mahoney saying he was an awful booker, but I could never find that clip.
Which one?
It was in one of Grimm's shoot interviews. I've never actually seen Balls Mahoney say it, so I can't confirm it.
With Balls, wait, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. With Balls Mahoney with what?
Balls Mahoney saying that Rob Fury was a terrible booker.
Really? No, I didn't hear that. So it's funny because I love, and he's another guy, man. I love John. Johnny Reckner was such a good guy. Balls and I basically. I tagged with John with Balls. In fact, one of my only dark matches in WWF was against Balls. John was a great guy, and I'm sure that John was very opinionated. Right? Balls was very opinionated with folks, and yeah, obviously he worked all over the place. And Balls could get if Balls got a hair up his ass the wrong way about certain people, he would hold that for a while. Until you went out with him afterwards and had a couple of beers, and you could change his mind quickly. But yeah, no, I'm sure that everyone makes mistakes. No one's the greatest booker in the world. Look at the WWE now. You know what I mean? Look at the WWE now. I mean, I don't personally watch it, but from what I hear, it's fucking terrible. And everybody makes mistakes. You know, I left Titan Championship Wrestling because I feel like they were making mistakes with the way I was being handled at the point. Booking, you don't know until it pans out. You might have the greatest idea today, and you put it in the ring, and then tomorrow it looks like shit, or the fans just decide to crap all over it, and it's crap. So nobody's the greatest booker of all time. Everybody has their ins and outs.
The reason I say that because Balls Mahoney said that somebody tried to say that he was texting racial slurs, which it's not hard to make. But
that Rob was texting racial slurs?
Yes.
Right. I listen. Again, I don't know personally, and if he did, he might have. I don't know. Obviously, I don't condone that. I couldn't see Rob doing that. I couldn't see him doing that, but you never know. Yeah. Heat of the moment, kind of, and obviously everything. And I'm not condoning obviously racial slurs at all, but everybody kind of jokes around, doing this, that, the other thing, and things can always get taken out of context. There's been a million things I've said in locker rooms, not necessarily racial slurs, but things can always get taken out of context. Especially when somebody's got some type of motivation to kind of stick it to you, and they can make something look worse than it is. But if he did. I personally have never heard Rob say anything, and he obviously has a lot of African-American guys on his show. He's got a lot of LGBTQ, like myself. His Sonny's been on some of the shows. Sonny Kiss has been on some of the shows. There's nobody. I've never seen it. We'll put it that way.
But with that, Grimm still goes to SWF shows all the time, and I don't think he would risk his career for Rob Fury if he's doing all these awful things.
No, and listen, they have a great relationship with each other. Rob and Dave, I think, genuinely like each other. Rob knows that Dave Grimm can bring in fans. I'll tell you, I did a show. Gosh, trying to think, show back in like July or something like that, where I came to the show. It's a decent, good show under this like bubble in like in Jersey, like Tom's River. And I'm outside just having a beer, waiting for the show to start. The ring was already set up. Everybody's bullshit inside. So I'm outside having a beer before the show starts. And there's a line of folks waiting to get into the show. So Grimm pulls up. Dave pulls up. And when I tell you, and it was a Rob Theory show.
Yeah.
When Grimm pulled up, that motherfucker might as well have been Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Those kids in that audience, that line, lost their crap.
Mm-hmm.
When they came out of that car. It was the funniest thing to see. It blew my mind. And the only way that 90% of those kids in that line knew who the hell I was is because of GTS. And all I did was walk into the dome, this arena dome gimmick, and these kids were outside, and they were giving me so much heat just walking in. And that was right after I beat Duhop at Grimmomania, and these kids were shitting all over me as I'm walking in. It was so fantastic. But yeah,
you're doing good.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I'm doing my job at that point. But I think Dave and Rob have a great working relationship, because Rob knows that Dave will bring fans, and Dave knows that he needs to. It's not just about being at the GTS compound or whatever you want to call it. That you still have to go out and do these shows under, in front of a live crowd.
While we're on SWF, there was a TCW. It was Billy, I want to say his last name was Fetsky, that split off from SWF to help start this promotion, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. So, right, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask how that transition went, like if there's any beef between Rob and Billy, or if it was just both kind of went their own separate ways.
I don't know, to be honest. So I came in at the tail end of everything. I don't know. So it's a funny kind of roundabout story about how I got involved in all of this crap. I had stopped wrestling for a while. Like, I was just like, all right, well, I'm older. I was concentrating on my 9 to 5, and it's just this wild roundabout story. A buddy of mine who I used to work for in Jersey and PA, this guy, Ronnie Post, who used to run Empire Wrestling Alliance. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, the Jersey indie scene was crazy. There was probably 20 different feds, and they were all drawing, because back then, wrestling, because it was so red hot on TV, you could have taken a shit in the middle of the ring and called it pro wrestling, and people were going to show up. That's how hot wrestling was. So I was working with this one guy, and he decides in like 2000, I think it was 19. Ronnie calls me up out of the blue. It's like, hey, we're going to do a show, this charity show in blah blah blah, New Jersey. So I'm like, all right, well, I haven't wrestled in like 2-3 years at that point. Let's do it. Let's, whatever. So we do the show. I meet up with this one other guy who I hadn't seen in a long time. And so almost a year passes, and I get another call. And I was like, all right, I did that show. It was a good time. We hung out afterwards. It was just like, riding a bike. It was a great time. But that was going to be it. So I get a call about a year later, January of 2020. Hey, we're going to do this show. Or no, January 2020, sorry. Right before the pandemic, this guy Tony, who I had known for a while, through Ron, calls in and says, hey, we're starting up this company, this fed called Foundation of Wrestling. Okay, so he was like, I need you to be my top heel. I'm like, whatever, yeah, no, how often are you guys going to run shows? Oh, once a month. I was like, I'm good. Once a month, I can do that, you know. And so I show up to the show, the first show. I do a run-in at the end. They do this tournament for their champion. The guy completely no-sold me. That's a whole nother story. Nonetheless, I go in, do the run-in. So we do another show in February. They wanted to call me Titan Killer. So I'm not familiar now at this point with any of the goings-on in the Jersey indie scene. I didn't know that there was SWF. I didn't know that there was this Titan Championship Wrestling that had just started, that had broken off from SWF. I didn't know there was all these different groups. So I'm kind of this odd man out. I'm just going to go out and wrestle. So we're doing these foundation shows. And the second show I did, where I wrestled their champ, this guy, Geoff Bravo, who's a piece of shit. I work him, and I basically turned into a shoot for a little bit. They were calling me Titan Killer. So, again, I didn't know. So I find out through social media that they were calling me Titan Killer kind of as a shoot on Titan Championship Wrestling. Didn't know. And at this point, Rob wasn't working shows at this point. Rob had basically, SWF had shut down because of all this controversy or whatever had happened.
Yeah.
No big deal. So I did the second show for Foundation Wrestling. There was a whole to-do behind that. Like, I wasn't happy after that show. I had broken my hand. I had torn my rotator cuff. Basically got into a shoot with the friggin' this dumpy fucking, Geoff Bravo guy who wouldn't sell for me, so I basically made him sell. It was a long story, but all of a sudden, I had to leave really quick after because I literally broke my hand. I was doing a trio woe and I ran in too hard, and basically I had punched the ring post full speed and literally shattered my friggin' hand. It's on video. It's the worst thing to watch. It's terrible. And I still made we probably did another 5 minutes. But nonetheless, because I left so early, I didn't get my payoff. Usually in these shows, you get an envelope at the end of the night, and that's your payoff. Your cash is in the envelope. Didn't get my payoff. So they was like, hey, I'm reaching out to Tony. I'm reaching out to this woman, Melanie, some crack whore. I'm reaching out to her and trying to get my payoff. And it was basically back and forth. Hey, no, well, he's got your payoff. No, she's got your payoff. Hey, he was like, guys, especially with Tony, I was like, I've known you over 20 years. Where the hell's my payoff? So I'm not getting a straight answer out of anybody. And now I'm hurt and I'm pissed. Like, this was just going to be a side thing once a month. Now I'm pissed. And so I see this thing online from, I think it was Chadman. He had posted like, hey, I see you guys got this Titan Killer guy. Like, have him reach out to me if he wants to be on a real show. Bullshit. Blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, all right, let me reach out to Chad because now I'm pissed. Let me reach out to Chad and find out what's going on. So I reach out to Chad, and Chad's like, hey, yeah, dude, like, please, fuck that Foundation of Wrestling bullshit. Come over to us, come over to Titan, and we're gonna use you big time. Okay. So what they wanted me to do just before the pandemic was basically pull Lex Luger. And I was supposed to be the main event of a Foundation show in March. And about 2 weeks before the show happened, everything got shut down because of COVID. And they wanted me to tell them I was coming to the Foundation show and basically no-show it and show up to this big Lacey show, which we just did a couple months back. We put like 2,000 people at Lacey High School, which was awesome. It was basically the redo of that show that was supposed to happen. And I was supposed to basically just walk out and do kind of the Luger thing and no show, and basically no show the other show, and their main event would be fucked, which I was completely ready for, but everything got shut down. So I started talking to Charlie, I started talking to Billy, I started talking to Chad, and we started doing the Titan stuff. And they were pushing me. I had won like a 40-man 2-ring battle royal. that whole deal, really getting over. It's probably the most over guy they had, to be honest, at the time. And just things kind of went south. There was just certain things that weren't working with me and Billy and Charlie, just differences. Even on the indie scene, there's always going to be creative differences and kind of, money differences. And so Chad left. Chad had a falling out with the guys. And Chad left and, started talking to Rob again. And when Chad left, he reached out to me. He's like, hey, he was like, they're not going to treat you the right way, blah, 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 all this stuff. And he was like, come over with me. We're going to do the SWF stuff. We're going to do Pro Wrestling After Dark. We're going to do Standalone. And you're going to be one of my top guys. And I'm like, okay, fuck it. I'm in. And that's where we are now.
So you mentioned Geoff Bravo. Is this a popular opinion that he's this bad? Or is it just a you thing?
No. I don't know if there's a popular opinion. Some people hate his freaking guts. He's listen. If I'm coming to watch a pro wrestling show, I don't want to see a guy that looks like the guy that's mowing my lawn.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not paying to see some guy that's not putting any work into their body and looks, like I said, like the guy that's mowing my lawn. And he was so fucking full of himself that, he wouldn't sell. There was, I don't want to go long into the whole thing when I first showed up, but it was such a weird, I'll put it this way. What really soured me on the guy, I didn't know the guy from fucking Adam. I could care less. But when I came out to the ring for the championship match for Foundation of Wrestling, the championship match, I got to the ring, hit my music, the whole 9 yards. I'm in the ring waiting. Something happened with the PA. Something happened with the music. And so we're waiting on him to come in. This fuck would not come out until his music started. So now there's a real problem with the friggin' music. So I'm standing in the ring now. I'm supposed to be this nasty heel, just this fucking tough guy. And I'm in the ring now waiting on this guy. Like, when I tell you, if you see the video, it's a good 5 friggin' minutes before they realize the music's really not going to go on. And he basically had to come out without any music. But basically you bury me by making me stand in the ring and just stand there like an idiot, waiting for you to come out. So at that point, I was already hot, and you can see it in the video. There's the kid Ryan, who films a lot of the GTS stuff, tapes a lot of GTS stuff, and films a lot of I think it's UWC or whatever that is. He has a video of it on his YouTube channel. I was fucking hot. And on top of that, this Jeff guy wanted to mark out and do a people's elbow. Who the fuck does that? A people's elbow. Mind you, you're about 5 inches shorter than me and about 70 pounds lighter than me, and you want to give me the rock bottom in a people's elbow. You fucking mark. So, yeah. it was a lot to process. And now he doesn't work anywhere because everybody hates him. So.
I've heard his name around. He was on GTS at some point. I just haven't seen anything from him in maybe a year. So
dude's 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. No one cares about him anymore. So that's why he doesn't do anything.
So you've had a fairly long career. What would your favorite match be?
Man, that's a loaded question, man. That's So I was very lucky when I first started wrestling that I got to work with a lot of the guys that because I was always the bigger guy. Even when I first started, I got to work with a lot of the quote unquote legends when they would come into town because a lot of the guys were smaller. So these bigger ex-WWF guys didn't want to work with smaller guys. They wanted to work with a guy who would actually physically work with them. So I got to work with guys that I had action figures of when I was a kid. Honky Tonk Man, Demolition. I just got to work with the Powers of Pain. gosh, who else? Snuka. Who else? Paul Roma. Just random older guys that I got to work with. Brutus Beefcake. I actually fractured my spine in a friggin' match with Brutus Beefcake up in Pennsylvania, which is a whole other story. But my favorite match of all time was probably, as silly as it is, was a 6-man tag at Monmouth University. We're not far from here. So Monmouth University was a 6-man tag. It was myself, Balls Mahoney, and this guy Rockin' Rebel. So Rockin' Rebel was the early ECW guy. He ran a lot of stuff out of near Philadelphia. After a while, it's like Outlaw Championship Wrestling out of Westchester, Pennsylvania, for a long time. It was the three of us against like 3 random, just indie guys. And we beat the ever-loving crap out of these 3 kids. And not physically like to shoot on them, but we turned these kids out. And we had such a good time before, during, and after the match, the 3 of us. And Chuck Rebel, the Rocket Rebel, was such a wild man. Obviously, how that ended was like with how his life ended and everything is unfortunate. But he was such an awesome person because you could not put a live mic in this dude's hand in front of anybody. Like, this dude didn't care if there was like a 5-year-old in the crowd. Like, he was gonna, if it was a family-friendly show, he was gonna just talk a lot of shit and be really vulgar about it. So we just always, we had a great time that day. I just vividly remember being in the locker room, kind of palling around, and the 3 of us, we went out afterwards and had a really good time in Long Branch, like where Monmouth University is, at this gentleman's establishment. But yeah, no, that's probably it. And I to be honest, I don't even remember. I know the one guy's name was like Johnny X or something, who I was working against. But there was 2 other guys, and I can't remember who the 2 other guys were. But yeah, that was probably. I mean, there's a million matches. Recently I had such a great, back in like April, for Mega Slam, which is like SWF's like WrestleMania.
WrestleMania.
Yeah, and Astro Morales and I had an awesome like 20-minute match where we beat the ever-loving piss out of each other. Yeah. And we really beat the crap out of each other legit that night, that day, whatever. But yeah, no, there's a million. I can't really pick one, but it's one of those 2 probably, either that 6-man or that recent match with Astro.
You were at Mega Slam this year, right?
Yeah, that's the match.
I'm just making sure. So there was that incident with Grimm having a seizure there. That was this year, right? Was there an incident with Grimm having a seizure? Was that this year? And
that wasn't Mega Slam. That was, gosh, I left at that point. I was already out of the arena. That was at like Storm Surge or whatever they called it. I left the arena at that point. I'm in my car. I'm driving home, and a friend of mine had texted me who was at the show, watching the show. He was like, "Bro," and he doesn't know who David. He doesn't know Grimm is. He doesn't know GTS. He just came there to watch me wrestle. And he texted me. He's like, "Bro," he was like, "some dude's having a fucking seizure outside the ring." I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Oh my god!" I almost turned around, and then I saw a video of it. Yeah, that was pretty wild.
Yeah, it was scary. And I swore the video was titled Mega Slam. That's what made me think of it.
Yeah. No, this was. I think it was like Storm Surge or some shit like that. It was called.
It was a very scary incident, and then he started holding GTS like a couple days later. And he worked himself into that.
Yeah. Well, it can happen. It's a lot of stress. I can imagine the stress that's on Dave's mind right now.
Oh,
especially because they're doing, was it Christmas Chaos or something soon?
Yeah.
Where they're holding all the belts up, and that's going to be a whole to do.
While we're on that, aren't you still technically the GTS champion?
Yes. I'm technically the legendary champion. Yeah.
Legendary. I knew it was one of them, but you haven't been there in a minute.
No. So right now I'm healing. I have three ruptured discs in my spine. So I'm just healing that up right now. So I did a run-in a couple weeks ago at a big SWF show where I challenged their champion, Kia, who's an awesome wrestler. But I came out. I laid down the challenge for his belt. He's their heavyweight champ, and so I haven't really wrestled. I've done a full match since like early October. But in January 15th or 13th, I'm going to get back in the ring at an SWF show, and then I have a Pro Wrestling After Dark show out near Pittsburgh the week after that. And I heard that there's a GTS Rumble coming up soon too.
Yeah, I think that's at the end of January.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. We'll see what happens there.
So, you said you didn't really travel too much, but what would be your best road story or like walker story?
I've got. There's too many to. There's way too many to mention, and some are definitely almost X-rated. Definitely X-rated. Actually, recently. So at this last show where I did the run-in on their champion, so Astro has become like kind of this meme online amongst the boys.
Oh yeah.
Because he did this what they call one chip challenge.
Oh God, that.
So it's the hot chip, right? So Astro did this chip challenge at this IWA show up in New York, and there's just this picture of him like crying.
You do it in the ring, or do you do it backstage?
No, they did it afterwards, like outside with a bunch of the other guys. Okay. It's just this picture of Astro basically crying. And they've stuck his head on all these different memes, like, the crying Michael Jordan meme and all this stuff. Yeah. So I'm like, okay. Well, I found out that the guys who made the One Chip Challenge have made an even worse challenge called the Duel. So the Duel is 50 times hotter than the One Chip Challenge. Right? 50 fucking times hotter, which is unreal.
Yeah.
So it's these two chips. They're in these. It comes in a box. It's two chips individually wrapped, and like this coin. So the deal is, you take a chip, I take a chip. First person to reach for water, milk, whatever, loses. And if nobody reaches within 5 minutes, you flip this coin, and that's the winner, and the person gets this like medallion. So I saw Astro with this whole thing. I'm like, oh shit, Astro's gonna be at the show. I bought this Duel thing. And I'm like, I'm going to show up to the show, and Astro and I are going to do it. And I told him, and Astro, I honestly think Astro pussied out. He said he couldn't show up to the show because he had work. I think he pussied out because of the One Chip Challenge. So here I am. He's not there. And so I got nobody to do this with. Nobody will do it. So at the end of the night, and I have great video of it. It's fucking hilarious. Dalton, Dilf Boy, Daltano, comes up to me. He's like, hey, Vince. So Dalton, for whatever reason, that slacker, doesn't have his ID with him. He didn't bring his ID. And he wanted a beer. So and Dalton's old enough to get a beer himself, but he just doesn't have his ID at the arena. So we're in the locker room. I'm like, okay, here's the deal, buddy. I will get you your beer if you eat one of these chips. So Dalton's like, okay. He eats this fucking chip. And when I tell you it's the funniest thing you'll ever see in your goddamn life. This poor kid's chugging a beer, trying to keep the heat off him, and he's basically crying. The whole locker room is dying, filming him, just crying his eyes out. I'm putting a big bucket in front of him just in case he pukes. It's some of the funniest stuff you'll ever see. But that was a recent one. There's been, stories about getting ribbed at like at titty bars or girly bars in like Pennsylvania. We had a guy, the promoter for a company called WWC way back in the day. This guy Tommy Rumsby, who gave me my first match. He knew this guy who ran a topless bar in the mountains of like Pennsylvania. Blah blah blah. We show up to this bar, and like the owner came up to us after the show. This random guy. And he's like, hey, don't go anywhere. Don't go back to your hotel rooms. Come to this bar. And that was me and this guy, Dave Duncan, and the kid, Johnny X. He's like, come back to the bar. Everything's on the house. I'm going to order pizzas for everybody, randomly pizzas in a topless bar. Pizzas, just take care of the ladies. Okay. So we go in, and I knew something was up. Because as soon as we got in, there was no women. So it was a circular bar, and the women would dance in the middle of the bar. And we get there, and it's like 11 o'clock at night, and there's no women. Like, there's nobody there. It's basically just me, Dave, and John, and, some other dudes on the other side of the bar. So the fact that there was nobody dancing already was kind of this tip-off, like something was up.
Yeah.
So music starts, one girl comes out, and it's completely naked there. Like, in Jersey, it's not like that. In some places, now I don't know. But at that time in Jersey, it wasn't completely naked. There it was completely naked. And this young lady walks out, and she couldn't have been more than like 25 years old at the time. Probably around my age. I was probably younger at that point. And she was hideous. And when I say hideous, I don't want to like shit on anybody for their looks or anything, but she was friggin' hideous. And her chest, her breasts, basically went down to her belly button, and she had a cesarean, what they call a cesarean section scar. I'm sure you know, like when kids are born through cesarean sections. Yeah. She had the old school. So there's two different types of scars you can get from cesarean section. You can get what they call a bikini scar, like my ex-wife has from my son's birth, where it's just this little slice, basically just under your belly button that goes left to right. Doesn't make this big thing. But back in the day, they used to basically cut you from your belly button to your vagina, like this huge like scar all the way down. And this young lady had this scar, like vividly, like out there. And she's dancing around. She looked like I don't know if you ever seen the original Carrie movie, like Sissy Spacek. She looked like that with this big cesarean section scar with breasts down to her knees. It was awful. So I'm like, all right, randomly, maybe she was, just random girl, didn't look very good. It happens. So now I'm thinking, next girl comes out. And the next girl is like 400 pounds, completely naked. And again, not to shit on anybody for their looks, but not what you expected to see at a gentleman's establishment. This girl was enormous. And so now I'm like, something's up. So now I see fucking Tommy Rumsby, walk in to the bar from the other side, sits down on the other side of the bar from us by himself, and he's just staring right at us, at the three of us. And this big shit-eating grin comes over his fucking face. So what had happened was Tom had hired these random women in town to come to the movie bar that night and just strip to try to throw us off. And that was a great road story there. It was that was an interesting night.
With a lot of indie guys, it's hard to tell what their finisher is, and that's one of my favorite parts of a match. Just, it kind of tells you when it's over, or gives you drama. What would your finisher be?
So I've had all these different finishers that I've used over the years, but at this point, I'm still going back and forth now. So I love what it's a sit out power bomb, the sky high type thing. Problem is a lot of guys can't take it. They kind of lose their grip. Certain people have done GTS and, kind of lost their grip when I'm trying to give it to them. Certain people at SWF have done it. So I like now at this point, I think I'm going to stick with kind of the camel clutch, because the way I can throw it or use it looks pretty friggin' devastating. Yeah. And because I don't kind of put just my fingers around the guy's throat, almost like kind of this clutch. I wrap my almost like Muhammad Hassan did in the early 2000s, where I just wrap my forearm around the person's neck and crank back. And I did that to that Pete Corbis kid out in Pennsylvania. It looked amazing, and there's some great shots online of that. And basically, you know, you work it, you really wrench on the folks. And you got to let them know that you're really going to wrench on them.
Yeah.
But it looks amazing, and it's a submission. Like at this point, I try to tell people I don't want to do a submission. I just want you to basically pass out. Like I don't want you to be able to tap. I want you to throw this, and you basically pass out from it, and it looks like $1 million.
Yeah. We've talked about a bunch of people, you know, who are rising up. Who do you think is going to be the next big guy?
Well, there's so many guys that I truly, truly, truly love. Obviously, Jay Evans, man.
Oh,
that
definitely.
kid is white hot. Kid can work. Kid looks like $1 million. Kid can talk. Pete Corbis. That kid is the king of fucking walk and talk. He can work. But he can work. Isaac on GTS, man. I was super happy to be the guy who brought Isaac, Little Poop, or whatever they want to call him at this point. I'm super happy that I was the guy who was able to bring him there. And introduce him, and I got him his first paid booking with like SWF and stuff like that, which was really cool. I see a lot in that kid. That kid's the quietest kid on the outside of the ring, keeps to himself, he's exactly what he is in the ring, outside the ring, but that kid has grown by leaps and leaps and leaps and bounds. And guys like Astro, even though Astro's older, like I am, I mean, he's younger than I am, but Astro could be on AEW tomorrow working Miro. They're basically almost twin images of each other. And
especially since he went bald.
What's that?
Especially since he went bald. He went bald.
Yeah. He's much better bald than he was. The hair was terrible. But yeah, there's so many guys, but those three, especially for me, that haven't had TV exposure yet, Jay, Isaac, and Pete, and Astro, so the four guys. And there's guys who have had TV exposure at this point, who I love, like Wrecking Ball and guys like that, and Rhett, who I've known. Listen, Rhett Titus, I've worked his uncle when Rhett was a kid. When Rhett was a friggin' kid, was in the front row while I worked his uncle in a main event in a Jersey Indie show.
Crazy, when Rhett was at his biggest, I was a kid.
Yeah, it's so wild. Yeah, to think about it, like it's funny because when Rhett and I first got to sit and talk to each other, he had mentioned it. He was like, "I remember you working my uncle in the main event of this like WWC show or something like that." I was in the front row, and you're like, you guys, and I was probably 21, whatever I was, 22 years old. But but those guys like Rhett and Wrecking Ball and it's Sonny Kiss, obviously, folks that have already kind of gone on and been on TV are awesome. But the guys who haven't been there yet, like Jay, obviously Jay Evans, the top for me would be Jay Evans. He's super marketable. The kid's got $1 million look. He can talk and he can work. That kid eventually, I 99.9% guarantee you're going to see that kid on TV at some point.
I hope so. He's been doing very, very good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he's a sweetheart of a guy too. There's a lot of guys who are in that position who are just not good people because they know where they're at. And they know that they're getting pushed. Like, people expect me a lot of times to be this asshole. And I try to be the nicest person in the world when I'm in the locker room. Like, I'm literally the gimmicks guy in the locker room. Like, if anybody needs tape, anybody needs what they call hot stuff, like the spray to kind of oil yourself up, I'm the guy, take whatever you need, blah, 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 blah. I'll give anybody advice, blah, 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 whatever. But there's a lot of guys who are on that trajectory where, they're getting pushed and all this stuff that can be complete assholes. And there's a lot of them out there. It's not a nice guy business by any means. This is not, a lot of times the nicer guys like Jay, like myself, like a couple of the other guys like Pete, will kind of get knocked down the roster because they don't talk loud enough.
Yeah.
They don't put themselves out there where they will, they think about the other guy first instead of themselves. And it kind of hinders them in the long run. But, Jay, I definitely think Jay would be number one for me because I think that kid's going to be definitely on TV at some point.
I can see him doing almost the reverse of MJF, being one of the
he's got that. He's got the punchable face. Like that's why I always like to say the kid looks like $1 million, but he's got just something about his face where if he's the heel, you want to punch that kid right in the fucking mouth.
Definitely.
And he's one of those folks like that MJF kid. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see him being alongside MJF and AEW.
Yeah, definitely.
For our last thing, is there any advice you want to give to people who are up-and-coming wrestlers or wanting to pursue wrestling?
So it's, to be honest, again, it's such a different environment now. At this point, I think, so a lot of guys, because of the way wrestling is now, they don't want to concentrate on their bodies. They want to hone their craft. They want to be able to do 9 million high spots, in a 20-minute match, and they don't necessarily care about the way they look per se. It's about work rate, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't care who you are. You can have a Ric Flair fucking work rate. But if you, again, look like the guy who just mowed my lawn, and let's say I'm not the best wrestler by any means, by any means, I'm a punch-kick guy. That's literally me. But if I get in the ring with you, and you look like, some skinny guy, but you can work your ass off, if I get in the ring with you, they're going to cheer me. Even if I'm the heel. And it happens at every show. It literally happens at every show. Just because of my size, I get cheered just because this is what people paid to see. People didn't pay to see the guy who looks like the guy sitting next to them in the front row. Yeah. You want to be a fan, get on the other side of that, get on the other side of that railing. You want to be a pro wrestler, try to look like a friggin' pro wrestler. Try to make people believe that you could kick their ass. If someone in the front row thinks that they can kick your ass, you're not a pro wrestler. And I think that's starting to come back around now. I think people are getting tired of seeing and nothing against skinny guys and flip-flop and fly, but I think people are starting to get sick and tired of seeing that, and they don't believe that these guys can do anything anymore. Like literally, if you think you could go out in the parking lot and beat this guy's ass, even though you just paid to watch him, that sucks. It's work on your body. That's the one thing. I'm almost 45 friggin' years old. I'm 6'3", 270 pounds. I'm almost 45 years old, and I work on my body I sacrifice so much to work on my goddamn body. But that's who I am. And that gets me over. Listen, the guy who I'm going to work at SWF, Mantequilla, amazing work rate, amazing talent, been all over the world. The guy is amazing. But because he's a smaller guy and I come into the ring, people cheer me. I could literally kill a puppy in the middle of the ring and people are going to cheer me in the ring because of where I am, like my size. Just work on your body. Literally work on it. Look like a wrestler. That's what, and that's always a loaded question. Like, what does a wrestler look like? Look like you could kick somebody's ass.
Yeah. That is, I want to build on that a little bit because that is probably some of the greatest things I've ever heard. Because lots of people just kind of say, think logically, or know what you're want to get yourself into, but that is what for anybody watching, I am also training to be a pro wrestler. But the one thing I have been doing is rehabbing injuries and building my body. I'm 5'10", so I have to get a lot more muscle mass than most people.
Right. The 5'10" is not small.
No, there's a lot of people.
By any means. 5'10" is not small. There are guys who are, I don't know, like Jericho is probably shorter than that. There's a lot of guys who are probably shorter than that. And that's, that's height is not necessarily the end all be all.
Yeah.
It's size, it's muscle mass. It's not
that's
necessarily height.
But you also need to have logic, because if the person you're going up against is like, currently if I went up against you, I'm not going to go and try to do a bunch of power moves on you. I'm going to go try to smart.
Yeah, and the thing is with that type of stuff, when it comes down to the actual structure of the matches, you have to know what you're doing. Like the next match, I'm doing a squash. The SWF show that's coming up in January, I'm basically going to squash this guy. I'm going to let him get a little. I literally have the match already planned out in my head. It's basically a Goldberg squash. Yeah. But I have this guy, just basically going to kick me in the leg as soon as before we even lock up. Boot me in the leg a ton of times. I'm going to basically go down to one knee, selling this leg. He's going to hit the ropes. He's going to come back, and I'm going to clothesline the shit out of him. I'm going to take his head off. And I'm going to tell him before we get in there, I'm like, listen, I'm going to take your fucking head off. Clothesline. And then I'm just going to hit him with maybe the sky high or some shit like that. But, yeah, when you're a smaller guy and you're working a bigger guy, and that's the problem with a lot of guys. You have a lot of these bigger guys that are going to bump like crazy for smaller guys, and you can't do that. And I actually had to be talked out of that, because I was doing that a lot for folks. I got read the riot act by the Powers of Pain at that one SWF show, because I was bumping for Kurt Bale, Lance, and Dalton. I was bumping for the three of them. And these guys read me the fucking riot act after the show. Like, why the hell are you bumping for those guys? Nothing against any of those three guys, because I love all three of them dearly, dearly, dearly. All three of those guys. So the greatest folks in the world. But they were like, look at them, look at your size, look at their size. It's like, you can't be bumping for them unless it's a huge, like something that's leading to this huge bump.
Yes.
So yeah, it is what it is.
And that's not the worst option in the world. You just need to go into it with logic instead of just what you see on TV.
Right.
If you go into it, like, if I was going up against you, I'm going to try to get you to the ground and keep you there.
Right. You work over one body part the whole time, necessarily the legs. Basically, you got to look at it like a tree. You're going to try to chop a tree down. You work a leg through the whole thing, and eventually, whoever's face or heel, like let's say I'm the heel, you're going to try to keep it. Normally, the heel would keep working one body part like that. So if, let's say you were the heel, you would just keep working, like, say, my knee, and then, get the rest distracted and try to, like, wrap my knee around the fucking, bottom rope or some bullshit. And eventually I have the big comeback. But, it's all about logic, and that can be severely lacking, especially in a lot of indie shows.
Oh, yeah. Well, some people just want to do some of the big moves and be done with it.
They just want to they want to get their shit in and just go, and it looks fucking awful. Because it looks choreographed. And that's the one thing you don't want wrestling to look like. You don't want it to look choreographed, and unfortunately, a lot of these shows now, they look choreographed.
I'm feeling I'm going to have some fights with people, because I hate calling the entire match in the back. That is something I've never understood. I would like to call it anything.
There are people that will do it. There are people that will sit there and will do it. And there's also people, I don't want to name names, but there are people like that you can go over your match. You can call the whole match. But there are people that are so scared that they're going to lose their spot in the match, and they're going to kind of lose their direction, that they will, and some dear friends of mine, it's an opponent, that they will hound you. I will get there, 2-3 hours before a show. I will go over the match. We'll get everything down, boom, 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 boom. That same guy will come up to me 7 times before the match starts to go over the friggin' match. But listen, if you don't remember any spots, just fucking call it.
Oh yeah.
Just if I'm in, it's not that hard. But apparently for some people it is. So
I much rather call a match out there, except for like, a couple big spots. If you want to do like a big superplex or something like that, obviously talk about it. But it looks a lot more real when you're calling it out there.
absolutely.
Instead of you looking for each other.
But
It looks a lot more.
It can get sloppy though if you don't have the right person that can't call it. It can wind up being a huge fucking clusterfuck there.
But it does look a lot more realistic than if it being sloppy and you called the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd much rather calling it on the fly and looking bad than photographing everything and looking bad.
Yeah.
If it's going to look bad either way, at least make it look realistic.
Yes. Yeah, you want it to look like a fight. And basically, it's going to look like a fight, especially if you guys are calling it in the ring. Because you guys got to figure it out and basically punch and kick each other until you guys figure out the spot.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, this has been an amazing interview. Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, my pleasure.
Do you have anything you want to plug?
No, just SWF show coming up, my first show back. To be honest, I don't even remember. It's January either 15th or 13th in Jersey. We have pro wrestling, standalone wrestling, January 29th in Schuylkill Haven, Pennsylvania. And then we'll see what I feel like doing at the Regal Rumble.
We'll definitely follow him on Twitter and Instagram. Is there any other social medias you have?
That's basically it. I got Facebook. Yeah, I don't use my gimmick name on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. It's all Vince Ceres, Ceres. It's all my shoot name. And it's all out there for the world to see.
Thank you for coming on, and thank everybody for watching. We'll see you on the next one.